how to give your organisation a competitive advantage. My name is Lucy Atherton. I'm a solicitor with Make UK. I'm head of the London legal team. There are 5 employment lawyers in the London team. Most of them are in the room, but we are part of a much larger employment law and HR unit across Make UK. I think, Astrid will correct me, around 60 last count, I think? 73. I'm massively wrong. So 73 members of the HR and employment law team, comprising of employment lawyers, barristers, and very experienced HR professionals. And so 2 of that team are sitting as panellists today. I'm going to hand it to you to introduce yourselves.
Good. I nearly said morning, but it's afternoon now, isn't it? It's whizzed by this morning. My name's Jo Boyd. I grew up in manufacturing. My dad had his own business. He was an SME. So I grew up in manufacturing and then went on to become an HR professional in the sector. So I've had more years than I care to share, actually, experience, getting for 28, I think, across various businesses. So seen lots, and the change we're seeing now and how we have to think about our businesses has changed massively recently. So yeah, it'd be good to talk about some of that this afternoon.
Hello, my name's Nicola Kibble. My role in Make UK is solution development. So if you're having a particular kind of problem, I can help you come up with a solution and send in the team of consultants and lawyers to support you. My background is that I worked as a global HR director for just over 25 years. So my last role in industry, I looked after 4,000 sites across 122 countries, but I've also worked with startups, SMEs across all different industries.
Thanks, Nicola. So we may or may not stick to the agenda, but that's what we're supposed to be talking about today. I think the aim of today's session is to kind of come away with some actionable insights to secure your workforce, reduce costs, and future-proof your organisation, and that's ultimately aiming towards enhancing profitability and productivity. So that's the aim of the game. First of all, we're going to try to get some insight from you, the delegates, the audience. So I know that there's standing room at the sides there, but the idea behind the next few minutes was to just kind of give you an opportunity to talk amongst yourselves on your tables, to kind of address these 3 key questions, because then we're looking for a bit of feedback from you, and that will shape the nature of the discussion that Nicola and Jo have with you after that. So would you mind gathering together for just 5 or 10 minutes, just to think about those 3 questions? Can you even see it over there on the board, on the screen? And then we'll get a little bit of feedback from you, and oh look, they've brought some chairs in, so hopefully everybody will be comfortable. So if I can ask you to kind of think about the challenges you anticipate, whether you think you have the necessary skills in the organisation, and we'll do a little bit of a litmus test as to how confident you feel that your team are to be fully committed to implementing your operational goals. So chit-chat with your neighbours, and we'll get some feedback from you shortly. So I hope you had an opportunity to kind of chat amongst your table and hear from colleagues and individuals in your organisations and elsewhere to understand a little bit more about the challenges you are facing. We had a best guess of what the conversations might involve. So we thought A, B, C and D on the screen for just keeping an eye on timing rather than kind of going through them all individually. Anybody have anything burning in addition to these issues that you want to kind of raise with the room so that our panellists can hear from you as to what were the key organisational goals in your organisations? Anything beyond these 4 key ones that you want to share with us?
Overseas competitiveness.
Anybody else? Sorry, the lights are shining on my glasses, so you have to wave. Brilliant, thank you for that.
Retention.
Yeah, I think those of you who were in the session earlier on kind of touched on that in the terms of skills, but it's a really important issue, isn't it? Thank you for sharing that. This is a kind of hands up. Looking at the question on the screen, place your votes A, B, C or D. Does your team, do you think, have the necessary skills? Clearly, I have necessary skills and capabilities to meet your goals. So, show of hands. We'll have to speed through this. A, hands up. Okay, not too many. B? quite a few more. That sounds promising. C, you obviously Chatham House rules, no one will beat you. And D, so it looked like it was mostly B. So you're in the right place because you know you've got work to do. Next question. Is that the same? No, it's not quite the same question.
No.
How confident are you the team is fully committed to your goals? Again, a show of hands, A, B, C, D, and this time E. So hands up for A. B. We're all wavering in that nearly, not quite. C. I guess there's not much of a difference sometimes between B and C in this case. D. And E. Shame. Thank you for that. That was really interesting feedback. And I think useful for you guys to kind of get a flavour of the issues that those of you in the room are dealing with. So that was just a kind of light, informal way of kind of gathering some insight from you guys. So I'm going to hand over to our panellists now to kind of take you through some of the issues that your experience shows are relevant to making your organisation competitive.
Thank you. So the area we're going to focus on is really your biggest resource, which is your people. So you spend a lot of money on your people, getting the right people in, training them, holding on to them, and hopefully keeping hold of them, as retention was one of the issues. So it's a very tricky market at the moment. I know I've spoken to lots of clients who spend a lot of money training their staff only to lose them to competitors because salaries are being pushed through the roof at the moment, which is causing mayhem for lots of companies. But one of the reasons why people don't stay is because there is no succession plan or nowhere that they think they can go. And it's because I think sometimes businesses fail to align their people strategy with the organisational objectives. So I spoke to a client fairly recently and I said, what's your company strategy for the next 5 years? And the strategy was to double business. And so I was like, is it productivity? Is it profit? Is it growth? New markets? And they weren't really clear. They just knew that their board wanted double the size. So when we broke it down, actually, and I said, so how often are your machines running? And they said, well, we're on 24/7 machine operations. So I said, okay, do you have enough room in your factory to get more machines in? No. How long will it take to move to a new factory? And they said, well, because of our type of machines, we have to have a specially built factory because the floor needs to comply with the machine weights. And I said, oh, how long will that take? And they said, probably about 3 to 5 years. I was like, okay. And how long do your machines take? So once you've got your factory, how long does it take for your machines to come in? Oh, that would be about another 2 years. And how long does it take to get your people staffed appropriately to work on those machines at the level you need? About a year. So I was like, so you need to do this right now. How much money have you got for that? None. Okay, so right. So when we start going through it sounds quite flippant, but actually looking at what your people resource is and long term, so in 5 years, are you even going to have the same senior management team in place for this new factory? Who are your managers going to be in 5 years' time? Who's leading this whole transition process through? How are you getting people ready now, fully trained to train the new people coming through? Is there a demand in the new area you're going to with people with the right skills? Are you reaching out to schools? Have you got a graduate program in place? So this is all part of your 5-year contingency. So really, we want the right people, right place, right time, right skills now and in the future. And the problem is that we don't future-proof. So we're looking at, and I think the gentleman there said about overseas competition. So we have a lot more barriers to entry. So now if you want to go and work in Europe, you have to consider it the same as if you're going to work in America or China. You have to have visas, you have to have the right work permits. Then you have all of your customs restrictions. So there's a lot more to consider. But actually that shouldn't be a barrier for us breaking into new markets. You just need to know how to do it in the right way. So those are kinds of things that we need to be looking at. So are we looking to diversify with automation, in which case our whole workforce probably has the wrong skills. So how are we looking to upskill them into automation or into new markets? So this is where we're saying about aligning our biggest resource with our organisational objectives. Yep. So these are some of the issues that we find come up quite frequently. Resistance to change. Now, that's not necessarily just from employees. Resistance to change can come from managers, it can come from the organisation. Lots of our clients have always done something in a certain way and a bit wary about adapting new change. There was a lot of conversation in the earlier session about AI and how that's moving us all forward. But I don't know about all of you. I mean, I use ChatGPT, but apart from that, I'm not really up to date with AI. So there's a wary, if you're a certain age, of moving to these new technologies. But if we don't embrace it, how are we moving forward? So it's taking that chance with the new generation of people who understand it and are willing to embrace it, and helping them bring us on the journey. And then the main issue that we come across for nearly every single problem that we encounter is poor leadership and poor management. Not because people want to do a bad job, but they don't have the skills. So typically you get promoted because you're good at your last job, and then we don't give them the management skills to be able to bring other people along the journey, and it causes chaos. So if there's anything you take away from today, it's really invest in your managers, because they're the ones who run your business day to day. And then just ways to evaluate your success. So, you know, it's really easy. We go at the end of the year and we say, have we hit all of our goals? Have we hit productivity? What are our retention rates? What's our employee engagement? So really we want a workforce where everyone is happy to turn up, knows what they've got to do, and gets the job done. But it sounds easy, but it's really hard, because you really need people to buy into your vision. And the problem with lots of companies is that you have your conversations at board level, you all agree on what your plan is, but it's not communicated down to a lower level in a way that people need to hear it. So there's an assumption that people just want to turn up for their money, but actually lots of people want to turn up because they feel part of the business. So it's more about embracing that culture of inclusion.
Okay.
Future-proofing.
Yeah, and just sort of building on some of what Nicola was sharing there, and some of what we've heard this morning, one of the things that struck me about us, you know, the majority of the room felt that AI is the next industrial revolution. And we're talking about how equipped we are with that. You know, it's really passing a lot of us by. A lot of us have a lot more of the digital skills we need to adopt AI than our workforce is. Lloyds did some research a few years ago on online banking, and the figures were shocking. When you're looking at the demographic of a middle-aged white male who is typically in manufacturing, they don't even online bank. They use their mobile phones to surf the internet, but that's about it. So when we start to bring in automation and new AI-driven technology, that's where your resistance will come. They're not going to come to you and say, I don't have the skills I need to do this job. They won't. They will resist the change. And I've seen that in industry where, you know, you get a new great system, but nobody wants to play with it because they just don't know how to. They don't have those skills. They don't engage with technology in the way we assume they do. And if we're already in a position where we're saying, actually, how are we going to get up to speed? They're even further behind. So workforce planning, getting your workforce ready for these changes is so important, because otherwise your changes won't happen. Your new shiny system will go nowhere. It will just die of a death, and you'll spend a lot of money trying to force that change through. But it's not just that, you know, we're talking about the skills, but actually sometimes it's about the amount of people you have. Have you got the right amount of people? There's a lot of nervousness around rising costs with the increase in national insurance. So, you know, lots of recruitment freeze. We hear that a lot, recruitment freeze. But actually, if that means you're understaffed, you're going to be paying out more in overtime because that's going to hit there as well. So that may be a false economy. But equally, having too many staff, if that then leads to, later on, a restructure, headcount reduction, that's affecting how your people see the stability of your business. So we've seen some businesses, there's this up and down, and then you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle with recruitment if people don't see that job as secure. It's okay, they're recruiting now, but in 2 years or a year's time, there'll be a headcount reduction. So that will be affecting as well. So getting it right. And it's so much more than people and the skills. There's the breadth of people, the diversity of people, bringing in different ages, genders, nationalities, skills. I'm trying to think, neurodiversity, all the differences that you can have in a workforce. You need to be bringing those in and embracing those. That's where you'll get creativity. That's where you'll breed your innovation from. So where are you getting that from, And then I think the other end, we heard about AI, and there was the session before talking about apprentices, and I'm a big believer in bringing apprentices through and growing your own talent. But there's also this piece where people exit the workforce. Very much we see, in manufacturing, that one person that's been around for 30 or 40 years that has everything in their head. How do you get that knowledge transfer? How are you going to drag that knowledge from that person? Because it isn't going to be their replacement in 1, 2 or 3 months. They're going to need to be working with someone for a period of time to share that knowledge and make sure that doesn't leave the business. So there's a lot to think about.
So one of the things that I'm quite keen on doing is being a little bit disruptive. So not for the sake of it, but actually to look for innovation. So I went to visit one of our member clients. It was a steel manufacturer in Sheffield, and they said, we're really struggling with costs. We've cut our workforce as much as we can, but we have peaks on demand, so then we're paying loads of overtime, and then when there's no work, everyone's standing around. So I said, okay, let me have a look at your whole operation end to end. And I said, actually, if you just change your shift pattern, you will save £500,000 a year. That will avoid all need for redundancies. So we just helped them go through a process of changing their shift pattern, which actually allowed for the peaks and troughs in business, and it saved them £500,000 and a whole load of redundancies. But that's because they weren't scared to adapt and look for change. But you kind of get in a little bit of a mindset, we've always done that. Everyone knows where they are with the 7 till 3 or 6 till 2. But actually, if that's not working for your business anymore, we need to be looking at ways to cut costs in a way that keeps people in work, keeps you operational. So don't be scared to look for innovation and change, and see where you can make savings, but in a way that benefits your organisation.
I'm going to chivvy you along. I'm conscious of the time, and they've got like 45 more slides.
So these are just some of the things that you'll get a copy of all these slides. So please have a look at them in your own time. So these are just some of the areas that we would be looking at. If you wanted to speak to one of us, these are the kinds of things that we would be going through with you. So you'll get a copy of these, so please go through them in your own time with your businesses.
Okay, so how do you motivate those people? How do you generate that can-do attitude? Because you can have as many people as you like, but if they've all got their hands in their pockets, you're not getting much out of them. So thinking about what motivates people, and I think we see that's changed. Generationally, we see some changes. Younger generations, they want to be part of something great. They want to do good. They want to be, socially, add in socially positive behaviours and products and services into the world. So we have to think about what ticks people's boxes, what's going to help them get on board, because actually not everything we do is that exciting. So what are the 3 key things? Research says that communication is a significant factor. Every time I've ever done an engagement survey, that's always the lowest performing area, apart from pay, but you'd expect that. So communication, how is communication in your business? And that's about there are a few elements to that. So there's timeliness of that. How often do you communicate? How appropriate is it? You know, so there's the other two are openness and honesty, but it still needs to be appropriate. If you don't communicate in the right way or the right information, you can actually do quite a bit of damage. But, you know, typically workforces see businesses as secretive, and when things aren't going well, they get less information, and that's when they need it the most. They need to be able to evaluate where it's going so they can make their own choices. As humans, if we have a gap in our knowledge, we fill it with all the negative stuff. So they'll make a different choice if you're not being open enough. The second most important thing, and it's something that can be seen as a bit pink, a bit fluffy, a bit HR, a bit peoply, but it's the emotional factors. And certainly in younger generations, they really do want you to look after their emotional factors. So we're talking about wellbeing programs here. Now, it's not all about, you know, soft cushions in rooms and
Fruit
plants.
on Friday.
It's not fruit on a Friday. It's much more. It's about what is your rewards package looking like? How does that support somebody, not just in work? Gone are the days where home was home and work was work. There is this holistic view of people that you do need to have. The younger generation very much see the time they spend at work with you as investment in your business. They want you to invest back in them. And if you're not doing that, they won't stick around. And they'll be very vocal about it. This isn't a secret that only I've found out about it, I'm sure. And the third thing, and this is going to be a real challenge, is that people need to have the resources to do the job. If they don't have the resources they need, you're not going to get very far. And I know that is a challenge. So, you know, being mindful of how you manage your people, what you're asking them to do, what resources do you have for them to utilise? You know, it's going to be one thing to expect them to be a bit creative with that, you know, and that can be a great challenge and that can be motivating in itself. But if they just don't have the resources, then you're going to find that they don't stick around.
Yeah, it's fairly typical that when times are hard, the first thing that gets cut is the training budget, but that's only a short-term solution, and long-term you're actually doing your own knees in, really, because you're not really protecting your workforce for the future, and then complain when there's a retention problem because they've gone to someone else who will offer them that training. It's a hard one, but please be mindful of how you manage your training. I'm not saying that, you know, you have the best training programs when times are hard, but don't just cut your training budget as a standard cut, because you need to be looking after your future.
Yeah, it's a short-term fix, isn't it? Yeah. So that brings me on to, you know, how are you going to know how to best invest in training and development? And that brings us on to performance management, which is always quite an interesting conversation. There's a lot of, you know, performance management gets a bit of a bad rap. I think the annual appraisal is not working. That's what needs to change. If you talk to people, they don't want the annual appraisal, but they do want performance management. They do want to develop their potential. They want to be the best they can be and grow in their careers. So the appraisal, I don't think, should die, but it should be more continuous. Those ongoing conversations about how people are doing, those more timely conversations. You know, we find that if you've set a set of goals for the year, in 2 months, the business has shifted and they're no longer relevant. So thinking about those, so making these processes more punchy, more focused, short amount of time, but more regularly, you'll get so much more out of those.
Aligned to business goals.
Yeah, aligned to your business goals. Absolutely. And as your business goals shift, you know, we know they shift, you can adapt, just be more dynamic with that. And just find a way to record those conversations. You don't need to have a form, is my view.
Yeah. I will say, if any of you do box ticking appraisal process, just stop it. Just don't even bother. It's not worth it. No. It just wastes everyone's time. No one gets anything out of it except you report to HR that everyone got a tick. It's just completely irrelevant. So if you're not having meaningful conversations and you're not getting any value out of it, just bin it.
Yeah,
seriously.
I think if our HR was in the room.
Anyway.
We all do it.
Yeah, but actually, it's even worse than adding value. It's causing stress. You know, your managers, if they've got 20 people, that's all the preparation and the conversations. They don't want to have those conversations. Their people don't want to have those conversations. You're actually causing unnecessary stress for no value.
Yeah. I'm not saying don't do reviews, just
No.
don't do box-ticking exercises.
No.
It's pointless.
Make it worthwhile. Because the other thing is you're setting an expectation for the individual that you're interested, you're going to help them develop, and then nothing happens. Okay, we can move through this. This is a bit of a, if you wanted to develop, there's some ideas there about the things that you need to do to develop your culture. So we're not going to go through that. So we can move on to the next one. And this one is just really about small things adding up to big differences. We can talk a lot. I can give you, like that previous slide, I can give you a whole list of things to be doing. But where do you start? It all becomes a bit big, and you're trying to eat that elephant. So, but actually, if you just do one thing, it will make a big difference. So, we talked about managing performance. If you're 30 minutes a fortnight, it's 780 minutes a year that you're managing performance, and that people are having great conversations about their career. It's much more beneficial.
Wonderful. Mindful of the time, I'm going to jump in whilst you're taking a breath. We've only got a few minutes left, unfortunately, and I'm sure you're all very keen to get to lunch. So on this slide are some key takeaways. As we mentioned before, if you were zapped by the scanner on the way in, you will be sent a copy of the slide. So we don't need to kind of slavishly go through what's on the slide there, but just a couple of key things. Understand your needs based on accurate forecasts. Think about a data-driven, comprehensive approach, and think about job design. Those are kind of key things that I think we've touched on today. So I think the key takeaways are something for you to mull over on the train on the way home. And I will probably draw it to a close there. Are there any burning questions? As I said at the beginning, the panellists, myself and a few other staff members will be here in the room for a short while after this session. So if you have any questions or topics that were raised during the breakout group today that you want to discuss further with Joe or Nicola, then please do stay. Otherwise, if there's no questions that people need desperately answered this minute, I will say thank you very much to Joe and Nicola. That was an excellent session.